2021. Our call to order. Madam Clerk, if you'd make sure we're properly convened, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning. I'm going to provide a very shortened review of the protocols for electronic participation in this meeting. As there will be a presentation, members should select focus view or stage view to have a full view of the presentation slides and other meeting materials. Voting for this meeting will be conducted verbally. For procedural votes that do not require a recorded vote, the chair or I will call for any objections. If you have an objection, please indicate your name and objection. If no objections are stated, the motion will be deemed to be adopted. For recorded votes, I will call upon each member and will confirm the vote of each member. If you do not respond when called upon to vote, I will call your name a second time. If you do not respond to the second call, you will be recorded as abstaining from the vote, and your vote will count in the negative as a nay vote. If you're participating electronically and are leaving the meeting, please send an email to council@peelregion.ca to confirm that you're leaving the meeting. If you leave the meeting for any votes thereafter, you will be marked as absent. We'll now commence the meeting with roll call. Mayor Brown, Councillor Singh will be attending as an alternate for Mayor Brown. Councillor Singh? Councillor Singh? Councillor Carlson?
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Crombie?
I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Demerla indicated that she'll be arriving a bit later for the meeting. Councillor Dasco?
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Dillon?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Downey?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Fonseca?
Good morning, here.
Thank you. Councillor Fortini?
Good morning. I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Groves?
Good morning, I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Innes also indicated that she'll be arriving a bit later for the meeting. Councillor Kovac?
Good morning, I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Mahoney?
Good morning, present.
Thank you. Councillor McFadden?
Good morning, everyone.
Thank you. Councillor Medeiros?
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Paletti?
Good morning.
Thank you. Councillor Parrish?
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Raz?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Sato?
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Santos?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Sinclair?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Starr? Councillor Starr? Mayor Thompson?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Vicente? Councillor Vicente? And
Present.
thank you. And I see Mayor Thompson. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That brings us on to our Indigenous land acknowledgement. Thank you. We would like to begin by acknowledging the land on which we gather and which the Region of Peel operates as part of the treaty lands and the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. For thousands of years, Indigenous people inhabited and cared for this land. In particular, we acknowledge the territory of the Anishinaabeg, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Ojibwe Chippewa peoples, the land that is also home to the Métis, and most recently, the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, who are direct descendants of the Mississaugas of the Credit. We are grateful to have this opportunity to work on this land, and by doing so, give our respect to its first inhabitants. Okay, are there any declarations of conflict of interest?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have filed mine as Councillor Sato on, sorry, I think it's 7.3, which is the actual budget because it includes non-union salaries, and I have children working for the Region of Peel.
Thank you, so noted. Anybody else? Hearing no others, I have a motion here for approval of the minutes from the February 4 meeting as moved by Councillor Sato, seconded by Mayor Thompson. Are there any objectors? Hearing none, that is carried. Okay, takes us on to approval of the agenda. That is moved by Councillor Raz, seconded by Councillor Parrish. Any objectors? That too is carried, which brings us to our first delegation. Item 6.1, Brad Butt, Vice President, Government and Stakeholder Relations, Mississauga Board of Trade, here regarding the 2021 Region of Peel budget. Brad, your 5 minutes, please. Brad, I can't hear you. Brad, might you be on mute?
Sorry.
Go
I
ahead.
did not unmute. I apologize. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of council. On behalf of the Mississauga Board of Trade and the 5 Mississauga business improvement areas, I appear before you today to ask council to support a 0% property tax increase for 2021. Members of council are well aware of the significant impact the COVID-19 pandemic has had on our business community in 2020, and the early signs in 2021 point to a continued difficult economic recovery and threat of future waves of COVID in various forms. The ongoing lockdown situation, which is most devastating to our Main Street businesses in our BIA districts, is of particular concern. Many of these businesses have been reduced to zero revenue or major decreases in income. And despite this, most have struggled to pay their bills, including property tax. We recognize that the economic impact of COVID has hit municipalities too, and that you struggle with your budget and the setting of property tax rates. At the same time, we also know that the federal and provincial governments have stepped up to provide additional revenues to municipalities through the Safe Restart Agreement, increases in gas tax and transit and infrastructure funding, and other funding enhancements for various programs and services, as well as contributions to capital expenditures. This funding should allow municipalities like the Region of Peel and the City of Mississauga to balance budgets and deliver a 0% property tax increase in 2021. We know that other surrounding municipalities are doing it. With direction from council today to staff to adopt a 0% property tax increase, we are certain that they can find additional cost savings, recommend capital expenditure deferrals and other adjustments, and report back to you so you can finalize the 2021 budget. Property taxes are a defined cost. They do not go up and down like corporate income or sales taxes as reflected in the wider economy. This fixed cost for a small business with significantly decreased revenue is a very big financial burden. Further, it was this council that eliminated the vacant unit property tax credit program, ironically just before the pandemic hit, at the very time business closings and vacancies are on the rise. So here's what some of our BIA partners are saying to you today. Our small businesses have suffered tremendously during this past year, and an increase in taxes would be an additional burden. It is imperative that all 3 levels of government assist our small business community for them to survive, said Jake Pedler, the chair of the Poor Credit BIA. With the uncertain recovery, it's important for small business owners to know that every level of government is doing their best to help them through this crisis, said Sam Coley, the chair of the Malton BIA. And finally, some small businesses are the backbone of the community, and this tax freeze will give them a small break and offer a necessary lifeline for success. Every little bit helps, said Stephen Smith, the chair of the newly formed Cooksville BIA. Mr. Chair, we hope members of council hear the voices of Peel's business community today and support a 0% property tax increase for 2021. Thank you very much.
Brad, thank you to you for your presentation and the Mississauga Board of Trade. I see no questioners on my list, so perhaps Councillor Sato, I see you waving, so Councillor Sato.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and my electronic hand was up as well. Yeah, I have a question for you, Brad. As you probably know, I had asked staff, and there's a report today coming up on removing the 1% infrastructure levy for 2021 only, and then reinstating it, which would delay our infrastructure funding coming in for 1 year. So it would take it over 6 years from 2022 to 27, I believe it is, instead of 5 years, and would defer potentially some items for 1 year or reduce, and we'll discuss that later. That would not get us down to zero, but you know, it's really easy to say, let's go for zero, but it's sometimes hard to get there. when, yes, the province, the federal government and the province did come forward with funds. But if you were watching budget last week, you would have heard that some of the funding for health and social services is still frozen at pre-COVID numbers, which have been reduced from 2019 funding. So we still had that shortfall. So I guess my question to you, and I don't know if you're here just representing the BIAs, because as I keep saying, the BIAs are about 2,400 small businesses in Mississauga, and we have 17,000 small businesses in the city. So have you spoken with those other, I know you wouldn't have gone to 15,000 of them, but how many of the rest of the businesses in the city are you representing? And, what are your suggestions? What would the businesses support being cut? Because that's basically it. If we're going to get down to zero, something has to be cut. So what would they agree to do without from regional services?
Well, the first thing is I represent the Mississauga Board of Trade, so we represent our 1,000+ corporate members, but we joined with our BIA partners because the BIAs had actually issued a letter that I believe was on last week's budget committee agenda at the region calling for a property tax freeze. We met with our BIAs. We work with them on many different issues. Obviously, they represent an important segment of our business community, and we agreed that we would together approach regional council today about the property tax freeze issue. As to what we would specifically cut, I can't give you a specific item today, but if other surrounding municipalities can do it, I don't see why Peel can't do it. You have to, obviously some things are going to be cut or deferred. You've talked about deferring the 1% infrastructure levy for this year. We're certainly supportive of that. There's always ways you can find to reduce costs, to reduce programs, and come to a 0%. If you really want to do it, you can do it.
It's not as easy when you're dealing with human lives and health. Our expenditures in healthcare are huge this year in social services. So, I guess if we cut funding in social services, that would cut funding to the people who are struggling to put food on their table mainly because of COVID, but, through other times as well. So, I guess we have a lot of contracts. I guess we could reduce our snow clearing and leave the roads covered with ice and snow, but I think the BIAs and the businesses would be screaming and yelling at that too. So, I agree with you. I'd love to get down to zero, and I think other members of council would as well, because it's not just the businesses that are suffering, the residents are too. And we need to do something for them, which is why I propose that we remove the 1% infrastructure this year. So thank you for your presentation, and we'll be discussing it in depth because we're not just rubber stamping a budget. Thank you.
Thank you. My list is Carlson and Councillor Parrish. I see you, and I see her hand on my screen, but I don't see her in my scroll through to the technical folks. But you're up afterwards, Councillor. Councillor Carlson.
No, Councillor Carlson's machine is the one I'm using. Mine is.
Oh, there you go. Well, then you're up, Carolyn. Go ahead.
Every time you see Carlson, it's me. And he's on the couch 6 feet away. So you're going to be dealing with two of us on one machine until David gets mine fixed. He's working with IT. Okay. Are we restricted to just asking questions? I think Councillor Sato got into a teeny bit of a debate there. Do you want just questions at this time or a debate?
Thank you, Councillor Parrish. Just questions at this time. And of course, we'll have much more time for debate afterwards without question.
Thank you. Through you to the delegation, do you know of any of the BIAs who have raised their fees this year?
I'm not.
Careful with your answer. I already know it.
Yeah, I'm telling you, I don't know.
Yeah, well, some of them have, and some of them intend to, which I find kind of interesting. Secondly, I don't suppose the Prime Minister or the Premier will be reducing sales tax or income tax this year.
I don't suspect they're going to reduce the rates, but they're certainly not going to increase them.
Oh, that's yet to be seen. I don't want to debate this with you, but your ask is very difficult for us. We've had such a hard time this year with loss of revenue, but I won't debate it. We'll debate it later.
Councillor Parrish, thank you. If I have no other questioners at this time, Brad, I'll thank you for your presentation. Receipt moved by Councillor Sato and Councillor Parrish. Thank you. That brings me on to reports. You see we have 4 before us, but I think appropriately we might deal with 7.4 first. That is our oral presentation from Norm Lum. I will then go from 7, 1, 2, and 3 here for information if anybody has questions. Then I go back to motion 10.1 that was left before us, before our referral, Councillor Sato and Councillor Palesi's motion. So that is how we will proceed. So first up, report 7.4 2021 budget tax infrastructure levy update from Norman Lum, Director of Business and Finance Planning. Norm.
Thank you, Chair and members of Regional Council. I'm here to present an update on the 2021 budget with specific focus on various scenarios regarding the 1% infrastructure levy for regionally controlled tax-supported services. Next slide, please. So as a quick recap to where we left off last week, the revised budget recommendation was a net tax levy increase of 2.87% or a property tax impact of 1.2%. These figures reflect the inclusion of a 1% infrastructure levy. The revised budget resulted in an impact to the average homeowner of $58, so a decrease of $7 from the originally proposed $65, and for the average small business owner, an impact of $103, a reduction of $13 from the originally proposed impact of $116. Next slide, please. So before getting into more details about the tax-supported infrastructure levy, I want to share the financial principles in Peel's long-term financial planning strategy. The goal of the strategy is to ensure the long-term sustainability of Peel services. As Peel has many infrastructure-intensive services, the strategy contains 2 key principles around infrastructure: ensure the capital plan is sustainable and manage assets. Next slide, please. So a key financing source for the capital budget and plan is the capital reserve. The reserve is funded through the infrastructure levy. The levy enables Peel to have adequate matching dollars to leverage federal and provincial infrastructure funding, to be in a position to sustain capital projects in 2021 and beyond, to enhance flexibility to manage unanticipated capital requirements, and to manage risk to Peel's credit rating. Next slide, please. So as presented in the budget overview presentation on January 28th, Peel has a $1.3 billion reserve shortfall looking out over the next 20 years. This shortfall represents a difference between the projected capital reserves and the amount required to fund future capital work, such as the stated good repair of existing infrastructure to maintain service levels, and service enhancements and growth that aren't fully funded by development charges, including the Paramedic facilities plan, the housing master plan, waste diversion, and climate change. Next slide, please. As requested by Council, the capital budget and capital plan were reviewed for opportunities for reductions and deferrals. So through this review, a waste management project, the material recovery facility for processing garbage material and recovering recycling material, was identified as a project that could be removed. With the extended producer responsibility legislation coming into effect in 2024, and based on more recent information, it is likely that the facility will not be required. Therefore, it is recommended that this capital project, with an estimated expenditure of $50.6 million funded from capital reserves, be removed from the 10-year capital plan. Next slide, please. So with the removal of the material recovery facility, the infrastructure levy increase that would be needed to fund the capital plan, if it was done in 1 year in 2021, would be 5.1%. As presented to Council in prior year budgets, the needed infrastructure levy increase is recommended to be spread out over a number of years to mitigate the impact to taxpayers while balancing the reserve requirements to fund the capital plan. Reflecting the proposed amendment to the capital plan, Staff recommend a revised infrastructure levy of 0.6% in 2021, plus 1% infrastructure levy increases for 5 additional years. Alternatively, as shown under scenario 1, if there is no 2021 infrastructure levy, then an infrastructure levy increase of 1.7% could be included in 2022 to catch up. And after 2022, an additional 4 years of 1% levy increases would be required. Under scenario 2, if there's no infrastructure levy in 2021, then an infrastructure levy increase of 1% could be included in 2022 with an additional 5 years of 1% levy increases required. Next slide, please. So each one of the scenarios that spread out the infrastructure levy increase has different risks and impacts. So moving from left to right on the columns, staff recommend a 0.6% infrastructure levy in 2021. This results in a 2021 net tax levy of 2.47%. And looking ahead, a net levy increase of 4.2% is forecast for 2022. This reflects a 1% infrastructure levy increase with 4 more years of infrastructure levy increases required. Under this scenario, no further adjustments to the capital budget and capital plan are required. In the next column, under scenario 1, with no infrastructure levy in 2021, the 2021 net tax levy would be 1.87%. Looking ahead, a net levy increase of 4.9% is forecast for 2022. This reflects a 1.7% infrastructure levy increase to catch up from not including one in 2021. An additional 4 years of infrastructure levy increases would be required. Under this scenario, a $6.1 million capital deferral to the 2021 capital budget is required with no adjustments to the capital plan needed. And on the last column on the right, under scenario 2, with no infrastructure levy in 2021, the 2021 net tax levy would be 1.87%. Looking ahead, a net levy increase of 4.2% is forecast for 2022. This reflects a 1% infrastructure levy increase with an additional 5 years of infrastructure levy increases required in future budgets. Under this scenario, a $6.1 million capital deferral to the 2021 capital budget is required, with an additional $79.4 million in deferrals required to the capital plan. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned on the previous slide, under scenario 1, where there's no infrastructure levy in 2021 and catching up in 2022 with a 1.7% infrastructure levy increase, a $6.1 million capital deferral is required. In considering the options for capital deferrals and in keeping with the budget principles of managing assets and maintaining service levels, state of good repair projects weren't considered for deferral. Focus was put on service enhancements or growth-related projects, either fully or partially funded by capital reserves. 2 projects were identified that fit this criteria. The first is the Paramedic reporting station. As presented to Council on December 3rd, 2020, this project is part of the long-term paramedic facilities plan to address the forecasted increase in call volume and to ensure response times can be met. The project represents phase 1 of the cost for a new reporting station needed for service in 2024 and has a total value of $19.5 million, with $19 million of it funded from capital reserves. The second project represents capital work required to advance the housing master plan approved by Council to address the affordable housing needs of Peel's vulnerable population. This project has a total value of $120 million, funded with $31 million of capital reserves and $67 million of external funding. I want to highlight that without sufficient capital reserves, this project would risk losing the external funding attached to it. Next slide, please. So under scenario 2, where there's no infrastructure levy in 2021 and a 1% infrastructure levy, in 2022, and in each of the 5 following years, a $6.1 million capital deferral is required to the 2021 capital budget, plus $79.4 million capital deferral to the 10-year capital plan. So similar to the options presented for scenario 1, maintaining service levels was paramount. So focus was placed on service enhancements and growth, either fully or partially funded by capital reserves. Therefore, to meet the needed capital deferral amounts, a revisitation of the service capital plans would be required. I'll now provide an overview of each of the plans. The paramedic facilities plan, which I spoke to on the previous slide, includes capital investments to meet future growth in call volume and to maintain response times. The total value of the plan is $120 million, with $114.7 million funded through capital reserves. To increase waste diversion, a mixed waste processing facility is included in the capital plan. The project requires a capital investment of $195 million, with $73 million funded through capital reserves. To increase affordable housing in Peel through the Housing Master Plan, $639 million is included in the 10-year capital plan, with $181 million funded from capital reserves. The capital reserves are required to secure the external funding of $384 million. And finally, to meet the needs of a growing and aging population, a capital investment of $60 million, fully funded from reserves, is included in the plan to expand the number of beds. All of the plans are critical to meet Council's long-term strategic outcomes. Next slide, please. So as a quick recap, when budget deliberations started on January 28th, an overall net tax levy increase of 3.21% was proposed, the equivalent of a 1.3% property tax impact. Through the deliberations, a proposed reduction to the net operating budget of 0.34% or $3.95 million was identified. From today's presentation, a reduction of the infrastructure levy increase from 1% to 0.6% is recommended. This option allows assets to be managed and ensures that investments to advance key strategic outcomes are in place. Financing the capital plan will still require infrastructure levies from 2022 to 2026. Overall, this results in a recommended net tax levy increase of 2.47%, a reduction of 0.74% from the originally proposed increase of 3.21%. This also drops the average property tax impact from 1.3% to 1%. The recommended budget results in an impact to the average residential homeowner of $50 compared to the originally proposed $65, and an impact of $89 to the average small business owner compared to the originally proposed $116. Next slide, please. So this concludes my presentation, and my colleagues and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. And I do have a list of questioners, and I remind you all that was our presentation under report 7.4, but what you have before you is all of the reports as well as you can question. 7.1 on asset management, 7.2 on status of reserves, and number 3, operating and capital budget. So with that, my list of questioners at this time is Sato Paleshi Demerla. Councillor Sato.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm glad I brought this forward last week and proposed removing it, since within a week staff was able to remove $50 million from the infrastructure need and reduce it down. My goal in proposing last week that we remove the 1% levy for a year was to give our citizens and our businesses a bit of a break.
Councillor Sato, I don't need debate at this time. Do you have a question of
yes,
Mr. Love?
I do, actually, yes. I have a list of questions. So, Norm, you didn't give a year for each of these projects that you spoke about. So you talked about deferring them, but you didn't say defer from when to when. So could you go back to your slide that showed the first proposal, the 6.1 deferral, $6.1 million deferral. So I assume that could be taken either as a deferral from one year to another, or it could be reducing the budget for that particular project. Is that correct?
Yes, so through the chair, Councillor Sato, thank you for the question. So in that particular slide for the $6.1 million, that's for scenario 1 where we're looking at pushing the increase into 2022. What that means is we're actually deferring projects from 2021 by 1 year into at least 2022.
Okay, but the project, my understanding is that the paramedic reporting station wasn't until 2024.
Yeah,
I'm
so
a
the
little
open,
confused.
through the chair, let me see if I can answer that quickly. So the plan is to open up the paramedic facility in 2024, but in order to have it ready by 2024, we need to put aside some money. So that $19.5 million that was reported to the council on December 3rd is for the purchase of the land required for the paramedic facility.
Okay, so the total cost of the facility is 19.5 million, including the purchase of the land?
No, so through the chair,
Okay.
the total cost of the facility is about $38 million, I think. So 19.5 of it is for the land. So there are additional capital projects in 2022 and 2023, I believe, for the construction cost.
Okay, that's expensive land. 19 million, how many, well, I guess what we should be doing with all of these, because I think going forward with the levies, you know, I find that there's so little detail here to make a decision on, you know, what can be deferred and when. You know, I certainly don't want to defer the affordable housing because I recognize that that's something that we, as you mentioned, I think you said, we need, you know, to put that funding so we get the other provincial and federal funding. Okay, so my understanding is that if we do not put the levy on this year, we would be removing $11 million. Is that correct?
That is correct. We'd be removing $11.3 million from the tax base.
Okay. So I guess I get confused when I look ahead. If we did the 1%, which is what I originally proposed, and then just moved everything 1 year ahead, so not catching up in 2022, could we not keep it at 5 years and level it out over those 5 years instead of doing one big increase in 2022? So you would still be within your 5 years, but each year would be a little more, it would be slightly more than 1%. And I'm sorry, I didn't do the arithmetic.
Also, through the chair, thank you for the question, Councillor Sato. You're correct. So if we wanted to spread it out and still keep that 5-year time frame, each year would be a little bit higher. So it would probably be about 1.1 or a little bit over 1.1 for each of the next 5 years after that.
Okay. And there wouldn't be as much deferral, correct?
So through the chair, no, not quite as much deferral required. So when you look under scenario 2, the one that you spoke to, Brad from MBOT, what you're really doing in that scenario is taking the infrastructure levy increase that was sitting in 2021 and moving it to the end of the line in 2027. So you're losing the $11.3 million from 2021 to 2027.
Right. Well, you're not really. No, I guess this is where I'm getting very confused. We're not losing it. We're just taking that $11 million and we're gaining it over the next 5 years, not 2020, 2021, sorry. We're gaining it if we level it out at 1.1% over 5 years from 2022 on, instead of one big jump of 1.7 in 2022, because I don't think anyone wants to do that. So if you looked at 1.1% every year for 5 years, you're still keeping your 5 years, you're still ending up at the year that you wanted to end up at if we did either the original proposal or the compromise one. And you're not losing $11 million. You're just taking one extra year to bring it in.
Councillor Sato,
and I know there's interest in everything in there as well, but are we really getting that much interest on 11 million right now?
Yeah, Councillor Sato, the CAO may have a thought on that. Then I'll go back to Norm. Janice, please.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. I mean, Councillor Sato, there are two real issues here. One is how much money are we going to collect, and the other is when are we going to collect it. So there are a couple of different things that, you know, affect the total dollars available to us in terms of infrastructure levy. So obviously, the faster we collect the money, we're able to invest that, and then we're able to generate interest over time. So that helps with the total pressure. As we delay and defer and collect later, then you either have to make up that gap through the dollars, as you've pointed out, increasing the amount each year potentially to make up some of that gap. So all of these scenarios, we can work through. The bottom line is, we only had a week. We didn't really have the time to dig into the specifics of what would happen with project A, B, and C. I think generally, as Norm has explained, if we take out the full $11 million in 2021, then we will have to work through and decide, in addition to the material handling facility, and I guess if I could speak to that, that is, I appreciate that's a difference between last week and this week, but this is an evolving issue with the province and this whole, transition to a producer responsibility. So it was a judgment call that was made that we could take that facility out. I think that was done in the spirit of trying to help council get to where you wanted to get to, but obviously it wasn't going to take us all the way there. So it's timing, and the problem still exists. To try and drill down today in the impact on this project or that project, I mean, that's work that would have to be done. I think council needs to just strategically look at where you want to be with the tax rate and what the infrastructure levy can contribute to your overall goal. We've offered you the opportunity to lessen the impact somewhat for 2021, and that's a sustainable change because that is taking a piece of infrastructure that we had planned for out of the plan, and then clearly that means we no longer need the same level of funding. That is the least impact that we can offer you on the overall capital plan. When we start getting into the other options, then there are more impacts on the plan, and subject to what you tell us today, we would have to go away and really do the work to come back to give you the particulars and the specifics of, project A, B, or C. We also know over 10 years, things will evolve, prices will go up. So these are estimates today that are all to some degree subject to change. The further out you go, obviously, the less specific you can be with your forecast. So it's simple, but it's complicated, and hopefully we can just really talk about. I think what we really need from council today is what's the outcome you want. Do you want, if you want this us to bring the tax rate down further than the numbers that are in front of you right now, then tell us that, and then we will go away and we will do the work. But the overall impact of reducing the infrastructure levy will be projects will either have to be delayed, or if we don't make up that money at some point, then something will have to give. But we'll have to come back and tell you exactly what that is.
Councillor Sano, any other questions at this time?
Yes, I do. So, Norm, by reducing the difference between what I had asked for, which was the 1% reduction, and what staff are proposing we can do without huge impact is the 0.4. What is the difference in reduction if we went with the 1%? I know you gave these numbers, but I don't see them on the screen. The impact to the business taxpayer between those two numbers is how much in dollar value?
So through the chair, just to clarify, Councillor Sado, the difference from where we were to where we are now, is that what you're asking? So dropping
it? Three things. So where we were, where we would have been if we went with the 1% removal this year, and where we would be if we adopt staff's recommendation of the 0.4 or 0.6.
Okay, I got it. So through the chair, what we're proposing today with the 0.6% infrastructure levy, the impact to the average homeowner is $50, and the average to the small business owner is $89. If we went and removed the infrastructure levy and took it right down to zero, the average impact to the average residential homeowner would be $38, and to the average small business owner, $68.
Okay, so we're looking $20 a year to the business and $11 to the homeowner.
Yeah, roughly.
Between the two. Okay. So, Mr. Chair, you know, I understand what Janice is saying, that, you know, we would need to dig deeper on this. So when we get to my motion, and it depends on Councillor Paleshi as the seconder, so I'd like to hear from him. But I think I would be prepared to amend my motion at the appropriate time. So when we're dealing with the actual motion, if I could have the opportunity to do that, depending on what my seconder has to say. Thank you.
Councillor Sato, you're first on my list because 10.1 comes up immediately after this questioning. So I'll be coming back to you. On with my list for questioners, and I'm still getting a little bit of feedback. If everybody can be sure that if you are not the speaker, if you are muted. Going on with my list of questioners at this time, Paleshi and Parrish. Councillor Paleshi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Norm, I was trying to follow along here and in seeing that you're talking about a lot of things that weren't actually on the slide, but to get back to some of it, I didn't fully understand why there is no scenario without a deferral of any monies whatsoever. And I realize this is just, it's kind of kicking the can down the road, but I think that's what all the residents in Peel are doing right now. So what is the scenario for no deferral of the capital budget and the reduction of the infrastructure levy?
Okay, thank you for the question, and to the chair, Councillor Paleshi. So the staff recommendation to have a 0.6% infrastructure levy in 2021 is the one that has no further deferrals in the capital budget or capital plan. So if you go back to slide 7, if clerks can take us there.
Oh, so you're saying there's no deferral required, but if we don't reduce the infrastructure levy, we lower it down to 0.6% is what you're saying?
Yes, through the chair, that's correct, Councillor Paleshi.
Okay, so where's there a zero infrastructure levy and no deferral required?
Through the chair, there isn't one. We don't have that scenario where you could actually drop it to zero and have no impact to the capital budget or capital plan.
Okay, so essentially what we could do is take that 0.6 and we could draw it out with a maybe a steady increase in the deferring of 2021 scenario 2, correct?
Pardon me, I apologize. Could you repeat the question?
So we could take that 0.6% in scenario 2, drawing it out at a steady increase in 2027. Correct? With a zero, with then a no deferral required.
Oh, I see. So through the chair, Councillor Paleshi. So if we put a 0.6 in, are you asking if we could put in the 0.6 into scenario 2 and just even out that increase between 2021 and 2027?
2022 and 2027. Yes.
Through the chair, yes. I mean, we certainly could extend it longer.
Okay, and so I'll listen to what Councillor Sato has for her amending the motion. Some of these, with respect to the paramedic facility, and I don't want to get into the weeds. I saw that Councillor Zeno was raising her eyebrows too. I'd like to talk about this, and maybe we can do that at a future meeting. But I think that what needs to be done in after we clear out the budget is talk about future opportunities for trying to mainstream some of the plans that we have so much of the capital reserves going into. So I think that's a discussion that we should have shortly after approving the budget.
And Councillor Pelletier, through the chair, I just want to clarify that in the scenario where you had asked about putting in 0.6% into 2021 and spreading it out in scenario 2, much going back to what the CAO had said, you know, what it does is change the timing of when you collect the reserve. So it does alter and change the impact of the capital plan. So there'd be some deferral required because the timing would be different in terms of when you collect the funds. But we'd have to go back and do the math to figure out how much of an impact would be, just to clarify.
So that's, sorry, I'm going to have to ask you to say that again.
Okay, so I apologize. I'll try to see if I can make this a little clearer. So you had asked the question through the chair if we put in 0.6% into scenario number 2. So we put 0.6 into 2021. And then, or spread that out 0.6 amongst all the other 1% increases required to 2027. If we spread out it evenly, there would be a timing difference in terms of how much you would collect, because if you spread it out, each year would probably be a little less than 1%. If you take into account 2021. So if I made it completely spread out evenly between 21 and 2027, it would be a little less than 1% each one of those years. But because you lower the amount below 1%, you're not quite collecting as much upfront in the earlier years either. So there would be a slight timing difference in terms of how much money you would collect.
I understand that part of it, and I'm sorry, maybe I should have just asked you to repeat the last part of it. What does that have to do with deferring any projects? We're not paycheck to paycheck.
So through the chair, what that would do is, so right now, so based on the timing of the capital projects, we would have in the capital plan projects for 21, 2022, and 2023. What that does is have less capital reserves available for those front-end years. So you'd have to look to see if there would be deferrals required for those front-end years where you're collecting a little bit less on the capital reserves.
I realize that we're collecting a little bit less in the capital reserves, but currently in the reserve, we would certainly have enough money to carry us for a year and then initiate the infrastructure levy in the following year with the steady increase. So I don't see how those relate to deferring any specific projects.
Perhaps the city manager might like to clarify that a little bit as well. Janice, please.
Yeah, through you to Councillor Pelletier. So Councillor Pelletier, when we do the projections around this, I mean, we start with our reserve fund balances that are in place today. So recognizing that there is a base there that we are building on, and then we take that and we look at the capital projects, you know, both state of good repair and growth, expansion, et cetera, that have to be funded from the tax rate. And that's really how we do the calculation. So yes, we do have reserves. There is money that is sitting there that has been accumulated through past infrastructure levy charges, you know, putting some of our regional surpluses in there. That's all taken into account. So it's not as though we look at the infrastructure levy as separate and distinct from what our actual fiscal position is going into the recommendations to council around the budget. So as Norm has pointed out, you know, if we collect the money early and we have it in the bank, if you will, then obviously we have, you know, we know our cash flow, we can sit down, we can look at our capital projects, and we can map those out so that we have the cash on hand to pay, or we understand, you know, where, if any, we have to borrow. If we collect that money later, then by necessity, We have to go back and look at the timing of those projects, and by necessity, some of them will have to start later because you just simply are not putting the money in the bank at the same time or at the early stages of the collection process. So, you can make it up over time as that levy comes in and you get back to where you would have been. But in the interim period, your cash flow goes down and therefore your projects have to be adjusted to match the impact on your cash flow. So hopefully that makes it a little clearer for you.
It does, and thank you for that. But so is this going that route then? Is that keeping our surplus the way it is and not touching the surplus on a go forward?
No, I think you're referring to the reserves as opposed to the surplus. No, I mean, we are relying on the reserves as a source of funding for those projects. So this is really, we're building up the reserves and the cash flow as the projects are being planned and delivered. So, money goes in, money comes out every single year. So the reserve is really just the vehicle by which we capture the funding, and then we account for it. Every year money goes in either from the infrastructure levy, or again at the end of the year when we have regional surpluses. My understanding is there's always a chunk of those that go into infrastructure levy, infrastructure reserves as well. So if you can think of the reserves as a bit of a bank account where I'm putting money in by virtue of the infrastructure levy and any other opportunities, and then when I need to pay for a project, I'm going to that reserve and I'm pulling the money out in order to fund the project. So the reserve is really just our bank account. It's not a pot that's sitting there separate and distinct from the investments that we're making annually in the infrastructure costs.
Right, and yes, and I get that, and thank you. But I think that our bank account has enough reserve in it to carry us for the year, not to have to put anything else off. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Parrish.
Well, thank you. I have to go back to Norm. Can you tell me, I'm having trouble with a husband trying to fix my machine and interrupting. If we left the infrastructure levy at 1%, or we took it to 0.6, or we took it to 0.0, can you give me the increases, and the rest of the budget stays the same? Can you give me the increases to an average homeowner and an average small business at 1%, 0.6%, and 0.0%?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Parrish. Let me take a quick look and see where my numbers are. I apologize.
Don't apologize. The problem's at my end.
So originally last week we had presented an increase that included the 1% infrastructure levy. Right. At that point, so what was proposed originally was the average impact to the resident was $58, and to the small business $103.
Okay.
What we're proposing today with a 0.6% infrastructure levy would result in an impact to the resident of $50, and to the small business owner $89. And if we completely drop the infrastructure levy, the impact to the average homeowner would be $38, and to the average small business owner $68.
Now, when you say impact, that's in addition to what they were paying in taxes this year.
That is correct.
Thank you. When you're doing all these calculations, are you counting on businesses that have closed and aren't going to open again?
Through the chair, I don't know the answer to that question. I have to go back to our tax team to see how they calculate the impact. I honestly, I don't know.
But I think that has to be considered, because as of December, 181,000 small businesses had closed across Canada. I would guess.
Carolyn, we may have some clarity on that right now. Perhaps the city manager.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So just to be clear, we're dealing with the budget today. And the budget is really all about our revenues and our expenditures, I agree. But through to you, Councillor Parrish, we have not looked at the assessment impact, because that's really what you're referencing. What is going to happen with our assessment role? Because quite frankly, we don't have any information right now to inform us on that. We are obviously well aware that there are impacts, but tenants are different from property owners. Is a business does the business own the building? Does the business rent? I mean, these are all factors that are going to come into play once the assessment impact of this rolls through. As you, I think, are aware, the province deferred the implementation of the assessment roll update that was scheduled to have taken effect in 2021 with 2020 values, I believe. Stephen can correct me on that. So that is an issue that's hanging out there, and will have to be resolved, and we will understand the impacts of that once the new assessment roll is delivered. But that, at the earliest, that would be in December of 2021. So we just simply don't have any data or information right now. And so this is the budget. This is really dealing with our revenues as we know them today, our expenditures. So no, we have not taken into consideration in developing this because we simply couldn't. We didn't have any information with which to do that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the city manager and to Norman. I would suspect when you do have that information, it's not going to be good news.
Yep, I through you, Mr. Chair, I would agree with you. The dilemma that we are going to have when we get down to, and we're kind of going down a little bit of a rabbit hole here, but let's go. When we get into the assessment changes, the impacts we will have to look at those, but that is really going to be sorting out the tax burden between classes. And that's going to where the change. So, if your commercial class collapses, you're going to have two not terribly attractive options in front of you. The first one is going to be to shift some of that tax burden to another property class, likely your residential, or you're going to have to significantly cut your budget. We don't have any of that information yet to be able to predict that for you. I apologize.
No, don't apologize. So the homeowner's going to save $8, average homeowner, if we go to 0.6%, and if we go to zero, their average homeowner is going to save 20, 14 for businesses at 0.6, and 35 for zero. I don't think that's what they're looking for. I'll save this for the debate, but I'd like to comment one thing here. We've spent an hour on this. Those motions that they introduced out of the clear blue sky at the end of a meeting, and we've now spent an hour trying to unwind this. That's why I referred it last week. I find it very disconcerting that we are going to take motions like this and just deal with them on the spot. I'm really glad we deferred this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parrish. Moving on, Councillor Raz, then Fonseca. Councillor Raz.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And Councillor Parrish, I do have to have a little bit of a chuckle because you've been known to do those in the past occasionally. So I'm just going to leave that one there. Norm, I guess question before we get into the debate. I know we saw for the staff recommended 0.6%. Here, just let me go to it would have been nice to be able to see the property tax impact for all of the options, not just the staff recommended option. Is that available?
Yes, through the chair, that is available. And when you, just to clarify, Councillor Raz, through the chair, are you looking for a chart of the property tax impact to the just on average, like 1% versus 1.2 versus 1.3?
Right. So on page 11, there is the property tax impact of the said revised 2021 budget of 1%, but it only showed the staff recommended option, not all the options that were looked at. So I just thought that would be another piece of information that would be handy for this debate.
So through the chair, I could tell you that verbally and see if I can make this clear. There are only 4 numbers at the end of the day. So through the chair, in our original proposed budget, with the 3.21% increase, the property tax impact was 1.3%.
Right, but and then for the 0.6%, it would be a 1%. And I'm just wondering if what would be the if the tax impact this year if we removed the 1% infrastructure levy entirely.
So through the chair, the net tax impact, the property tax impact, if we remove the 1% infrastructure levy, would be 0.77%.
Thank you. Okay, that's what I was looking for. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Fonseca.
Thank you, through Mr. Chair. Councillor Rouse actually asked my question, but one further follow-up to Councillor Paleshi's questions about the reserves. So to Norm, with regards to our reserves, we are required through legislation every year to show there's a certain threshold. Are we not required to show a certain threshold as a region in terms of what is in our reserves?
So through the chair, thank you for the question, Councillor Fonseca. There is a threshold requirement. It's not for capital reserves. There's a recommended threshold when we're looking at our working fund reserves, just to make sure you have enough in the bank for a rainy day, and that we need to maintain a balance between 5 and 10%.
Okay, so that's our working fund reserves, nothing to do with capital reserves. Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Okay, those are all my questions for now before we move into motions on the floor and debate. But Madam Clerk, just to make sure that I'm dealing with the items properly, I believe with regards to 7.1, we need a motion to receive the Asset Management Program report. Is that correct? A recorded vote on it. So we need a recorded vote with regards to 7.1 to receive it properly, as moved by Councillor Parrish and seconded by Councillor Sinclair. The vote over to you, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That the amendments to the asset classes and asset levels of service outlined in Appendix 2 of the report of the Commissioner of Finance and Chief Financial Officer listed on the February 11th, 2021 Regional Council Budget Agenda titled Enterprise Asset Management be approved. Councillor Singh?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Singh in favor. Councillor Carlson?
Yes.
Councillor Carlson in favor. Mayor Crombie?
Yes.
Mayor Crombie in favor. Councillor Demurla?
Yes.
Councillor Demurla in favor. Councillor Dasco?
Yes.
Councillor Dasco in favor. Councillor Dillon? Councillor Dillon? Councillor Downey?
In favor.
Councillor Downey in favor. Councillor Fonseca? Councillor Fonseca? Councillor Fortini?
In favor.
Councillor Fortini in favor. Councillor Groves?
In favor.
Councillor Groves in favor. Councillor Innes?
In favor.
Councillor Innes in favor. Councillor Kovac?
Yes.
Councillor Kovac in favor. Councillor Mahoney?
Yes.
Councillor Mahoney in favor. Councillor McFadden?
In favor.
Councillor McFadden in favor. Councillor Medeiros?
Yes.
Councillor Medeiros in favor. Councillor Paleshi?
Yes.
Councillor Paleshi in favor. Councillor Parrish?
Yes.
Councillor Parrish in favor. Councillor Raz?
Yes.
Councillor Raz in favor. Councillor Sato?
Yes.
Councillor Sato in favor. Councillor Santos?
Yes.
Councillor Santos in favor. Councillor Sinclair?
In favor.
Councillor Sinclair in favor. Councillor Starr?
In favor.
Councillor Starr in favor. Mayor Thompson?
In favor.
Mayor Thompson in favor. Councillor Vicente?
Yes, approve.
Councillor Vicente in favor. And I see Councillor Fonseca.
My screen is completely black. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Oh, okay, thank you. In favor.
Councillor
Thank you.
Fonseca in favor. Thank you, and it carries.
Thank you very much. What that leaves before me to deal with is we had the oral presentation 7.4 and 7.2, which is the status of reserves. All I need is receipt of those, as moved by Mayor Crombie, seconded by Councillor Sato. Is there anybody opposed to that? Those carry. So, folks, what remains before the chair is 7.3, which is the actual recommended operating and capital budget at the 0.6 number now that you've just gone through. But the main item before me from our last meeting and referred from them is item 10.1, the removal of the 1% infrastructure levy. And I do have that motion still before me from Councillor Sato and Paleshi. And as promised, Councillor Sato, first over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And sorry, I'm trying to slip back to my budget agenda from the slides and find my motion. Sorry. So my motion was just basically that the 1% be removed, and there was nothing more on that. So what I am going to amend that to today, I'm going to leave it at removing the 1% from 2021, because I think we can't talk every week about helping our small businesses that have been forced to close and then not do anything to try and reduce the tax burden on them in a coming year when we can. But what I'm going to propose to add to that motion is that from 2022, for the following 5 years, that the levy be set at 1.1. And that would actually give us, and that's a little bit more than what norm, I think if we divided the 5.2 million over 5 years, it would be 1.02. If we went to 1.1, that would end up giving us 5.5, which actually is more than what the shortfall was. And I think we could catch up a lot quicker that way. I think that this is something that we have to do this year. And I want to comment that, Councillor Parrish, I do take great exception to your complaint that I brought it on at the last minute. We're here in budget. Our job as councillors is to review the budget and look at the taxes and find any way that we can remove the burden on our taxpayers. And I'm not here to rubber stamp a budget that was brought forward by staff. I'm here to question, I'm here to suggest, and that's been my job all along as member of council. So yes, I brought it on last week after listening to 1.5 days of budget presentations and looking over that period of time as to where we could perhaps reduce the impact on the taxpayers. And I didn't hear any opportunities other than the levy. And I want to say that I don't want you to think that I'm against infrastructure levies. I was the councillor who recommended that the region of Peel first introduce an infrastructure levy many, many years ago. So, you know, I do have a record of supporting infrastructure levies. I think they're very important. But there are times when we need to take a step back. I think Councillor Paleshi fleshed it out very well when he pointed out that we do have money in the reserves. We're not going to run short for the next couple of years. And by spreading it over those years, we may lose a little bit of interest, but interest rates aren't that great right now. So I don't think it's going to be as much as what we've usually lost. And I think we can do it. I've seen us do wonderful things over the years with capital budgets, reducing costs, especially land costs. I was kind of appalled at the 19 million and was told that a lot of that was for land purchase. And I know staff only had a week to bring this forward. So maybe next year we need to have more detail, and I think Councillor Paleshi got it right. We need to sit down and take a look at those capital budgets again and those projects and see where we can cut some corners and sharpen some pencils. So with the amendment, and if my seconder was Councillor Paleshi, if you would agree to that amendment that we leave it at the 1% removed this year and spread at 1.1 over the next 5 years so that we still end up having received the total funds by the end date that staff originally proposed. Thank you.
Thank you. And just for clarity, before I go to Councillor Paleshi, if he's still willing to second the motion, in reading what was before me, and events have overtaken us, it did read last week that the 1% infrastructure levy be removed. It almost makes more sense to say that the infrastructure levy be removed for this year, because now it's at 0.6%. But either way, be that as it may, I think the more important point is you're saying, and that it be re-caught up, if you will, over the next 5 years. Now, you've said 1.1%. I just want some clarity, if we can, on what that number would be, so that if we were to remove the infrastructure levy this year, whether it be the 1% or the 0.6%, and we will then make it over the next 5 years 1x, whatever x is, just so that we're sure. If that's what is before me, I first want clarity from the CAO and the Mr. Lum to be sure that we've got the right quantum and we're voting on the right thing. Then, Councillor Paleshi, I'm coming to you. Janice?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So we've not had the opportunity to do the calculation. So I wonder if we could amend that slightly to say, and direction be given to staff to allocate that deferral over the 5-year period, and then we can report back to you on what that number is, as opposed to put a number in there now that may or may not be quite accurate. I think it achieves the same thing. I'm very clear on what the motion is asking, but I think that wording would allow us to go away, do the work, and then come back to you and tell you what that is. It's approximately the number that's in there. I just want to make sure we've done our homework on it.
Okay, thank you very much, especially
And
from the chair. So,
I'm fine with that
very
wording,
good.
Mr. Chair.
So thank you, Councillor Sato. So the motion really is that we remove the infrastructure levy for this year and that it be recouped incrementally over the next 5 years at the rate to be determined. I think that says it beautifully. Councillor Sato, you tell me you're happy with that. Thank you. Councillor Paleshi, you're my seconder. I still need you to second it, and I need that first so that we can all speak to a motion. Are you happy to second that motion, Councillor Paleshi?
I am, Mr. Chair.
You now have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Councillor Sato. And just to continue that conversation, there's things in the budget like the 2.5 million for standardized software quality assurance, 2.2 million to migrate content to new enterprise content management, 2 million for procurement and implementation of enterprise asset management. So I think there's money there that has the ability to be moved to the following years. So I support this motion. I think this is what the residents need right now, and I call it the kick in the can down the road motion. And essentially everybody in Peel is doing that right now. And I think we, as to show good governance, need to support the residents of Peel to give them the best tools and ability to get through the remaining of this year, and hopefully we come out in 2022 on a positive, on a high. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Parrish.
Support the motion. I was reading an article yesterday in the Pointer from Isaac Callan, and it says Peel councillors promise a home for all in 2018, and they're failing miserably. Everybody should read that article because 1% infrastructure affects housing. 2021 may be as bad as 2020 was, and this could continue, and I don't know what we do in 2022. It's short-term gain for long-term pain. The amounts aren't big enough as far as I'm concerned. A $14 savings on a small business and an $8 savings on a homeowner is somewhat ridiculous. They're not going to be happy with this. I haven't gotten my cry I've been getting from small businesses, please, please, please let us open up again. It's not, oh, and by the way, cut our taxes. I haven't had a single person ask for that other than the MBOT. And small businesses have been closing permanently in Canada, and more will close in January and February. And as the city manager said, those costs that we're not getting in taxes will be shifted to homeowners for 2022. I think it's a very bad idea. I'm sorry if I upset Councillor Sato. She and I are usually on the same side on a lot of things. But something is important. I do introduce motions during debates, but I don't do it where it's going to cost lots of money and we don't know the ramifications for it. I'm frightened that 2021 health-wise is going to be a worse year than 2022. They're talking about all these different strains of COVID now. It's been a terrible year, and I can't see anything getting better, at least until they're talking about next winter. So for $14, the disruption it's going to cause to all our reserve funds and everything else that we're doing. You have to remember, we make decisions week over week over week, and we approve projects, and we talk about clean air, and we talk about all these projects every week, and we all happily pass them all. And then when the bill comes in at the end of the year for the next year's budget, everybody goes, whoops, how do we do that? So no, I can't support this. I think the budget was well presented. I'm actually sorry that the staff came back with the 0.6 as a feasible thing, because it really isn't going to make anybody happy in the small business sector. And it's certainly going to cause a lot of disruption in financial planning over the year. And everybody should read that Pointer article that was put out yesterday and realize we're failing in that department. So I'm not supporting it. Thank you.
And thank you, Councillor Parrish. And for clarity, can I assume, and I know that's always dangerous, that you've made it very clear you won't be supporting that? Does that mean you would consider moving, and I believe it's 7.3, the operating and capital budget as presented with what is now the new 0.6% infrastructure levy as recommended by staff? Would you be moving that if this motion fails, or would someone be doing that at the appropriate time? And I see people waving. So Councillor Parrish, if you would be happy, I see Mayor Thompson seconding that.
I would.
Oh, very good.
I'd
That
be
helps
happy
us.
to second it too.
Very, very good. Thank you, Mayor Crombie. So very good. So we know what's before us. You have the motion from Sato and Paleshi, as you understand it, to carry it 0 this year on the 1% and make it up over the next 5 years. Or you have the budget as presented as an alternate motion if that one fails, but recognizing that it is no longer 1% that we would be adding to reserves. The new number presented by staff today for that component of the budget is only 0.6%. That is what is before the chair. Speakers to the motions. Councillor Demerla.
Thank you, Chair. And I just wanted to say that I'm really glad that staff came back with something that's a bit of a compromise. And I'm happy to support that, the 0.6. I cannot support the 0% levy because I really fear that next year will be a much, much harder budget. And I fear that next year we'll have the same additions. It's really hard for us to cut services. The easy ones to cut is what's in the background. So a capital levy, because, you know, it doesn't show up right away. But I think it's a little, and I can see why that's the case, but I think in the long run, it just hurts us. It's short-sighted. We need to sort of take the middle road, which is, you know, the 0.6 lands perfectly for me. I would have been happy to, frankly, support keeping the 1%, because the one thing I've noticed as a relatively new councillor is that almost every year at some level, the capital levy is questioned. So it just seems to be the easiest target, and it's one that needs to be protected, in my opinion, because as a municipality, our primary role is keeping the infrastructure in good repair. And for that, we need to have that levy consistently. The reason we have a good situation now is because presumably in the past, we consistently collected the 1% levy. If we stop collecting it in 1 year, it becomes easy down the road to every year sort of pare that down. So my own sense is I would have preferred to keep the 1%, but I'm happy with the compromise. It was a compromise that I suggested last Thursday, and so I'm happy to support the 0.6% levy. I like Councillor Sato's idea, though, of making up the 0.4%. So I'm just wondering if staff's suggestion of the 0.6%, can we tack onto that the second part of Councillor Sato's motion, which is direction to staff that over the 5 years, the 0.4% deficit will be collected over the 5 years, just as we were going to do with the 1%. That would be good to just make it very clear that we are not prolonging the period of infrastructure levy collection. Thank you.
Thank you, though, and I see your point, though, for the sake of clarity, to be very clear, that 0.4% is not a deferral. That's a true savings. We don't have to recoup that 4%. And Janice, I see you nodding, and I think, so your point's well made. Do we want to sort of add more to annualization of it? But we are not kicking 0.4% down the road. That was a genuine, true savings. And Councillor, if it comes down to that, perhaps I'll entertain a motion depending upon where the rest of the conversation takes us and how the votes pan out. My next speaker is Councillor Raz. My apologies. Sorry, Councillor Raz, I apologize. I jumped one. It is Councillor Fonseca, then Raz, then Starr. With my apologies, Councillor Fonseca.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No problem. I seem to be having some technical difficulties. So if I cut out, I apologize for that. I just wanted to say, speaking to the motion, I really have struggled with this. Normally, in a typical situation, even outside of where it's been extremely tough in tough budgeting years, since my time on council in 2010, I have always supported infrastructure levy, both at the region and at the city. And I've listened intently to the discussion. And I do want to say thank you to staff for what you have brought forward in terms of the longer term impacts. And I agree with everything that has been said in terms of discussion and debate. I do think that what this has exposed is that we as regions and municipalities have such limited tools to work with. And the COVID pandemic has exposed that even further. What I do know and what I can say is I don't have a BIA in Ward 3. I have talked to over the past, well, obviously year, but even over the past couple of months to business owners, small business owners, residents in the community, and they are, and as we've had discussion, everyone is struggling intent that they're struggling beyond this typical governance structure or model that we have at any order of government. And at the end of the day, in the here and now, residents and businesses don't have the cash on hand, even $20 for a resident, even $30 for businesses. To me, what I have heard is that they are struggling and suffering. And hearing further that our reserves are in a state of, we're in a good state with our reserves. And I recognize that this year is only one moment in time, and we need to be looking forward into the longer term. That being said, I do support the motion that Councillor Sato and Councillor Paleshi have put forward today, because it's one small way that we can show the businesses and the residents in the region of Peel that with the tools, the limited tools that we have their backs. So I do support Councillor Sato and Councillor Paleshi's, or I will be supporting Councillor Sato and Councillor Paleshi's motion of removing the reserve fund. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Raz.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And for many years, I get into the nuts and bolts of the budget, and this year was obviously a very, very tough one, and we have to make some tough decisions this year. It's an extraordinary year, and next year may be an extraordinary year, but we'll deal with it at that point. I think understanding that the material waste facility will no longer be needed is huge, and I'm happy to hear that. I fully support Councillor Sato's motion, and I believe that this is in the right direction we need to go. And the fact that the material recovery facility is no longer needed, we only really need to replace that the 0.6%, not the full 1%. So I'm happy with the direction we're going, and I think our residents and businesses have the expectation that we will be making tough decisions this year, and this is the one, unfortunately, that that goes in a direction that may cut capital a little bit down the road, but our services that are most needed now will stay intact. And just to Councillor Demerla's point, and to Councillor Fonseca's point, yes, we still have to pay a lot of infrastructure costs. That's because we own I can't remember the term, we own quite a bit of the infrastructure, but get very little tax revenue to support the reinvestment of that infrastructure. That certainly needs to change going forward. Yeah, I will just leave it at that, Mr. Chair, and fully support that motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Starr.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think this is a difficult one, but I really think that we have to stay the course. What we're doing basically is political tinkering, and we think we're all experts. And for a few dollars, I don't think we know what the future is going to bring, and I think there may be bigger impacts. So what does a few dollars mean today? It means that, yes, there'll be a few people thinking we've done $20, $30, $50, and that's wrong. That's wrong. I've had 5 calls. In fact, I just looked those up and emails regarding taxes. All 5 have indicated they wanted massive cuts. They wanted massive deferrals. Nobody talked about saving a few dollars. And when I say a few, you're talking double digits. That's it. If we're really talking about helping all these businesses and small people, cut the taxes by hundreds. And that's what we're faced with. So I can't support tinkering with 0.6% and trying to save a few dollars. I think our impacts are going to be even worse down the road. So let's not mess with a system that we put in place years ago to make sure that we do have infrastructure dollars. We do have something that we're working towards overall as a true budget. And so I'm going to support or not support this and support Councillor Parrish's or at least the staff report. I think Councillor Parrish has a motion there, but we really shouldn't be tinkering, and that's what it is. So that's my take on it.
Thank you, Councillor Starr. Councillor Santos.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, and I really appreciate this important debate going on right now. Can I get an understanding from staff, based on Councillor Sato's motion, can you give us examples of infrastructure projects that may be negatively impacted or delayed because of this, if it passes?
Yeah, I don't know that staff, you're taking an overall quantum and it's hard to cherry, but perhaps the CAO can help us out.
Well, I think Norm tried to illustrate some of that in his presentation. He talked about the ambulance reporting facility, for example. But to be clear again, and I'm not certain, Councillor Santos, if I'm misunderstanding your question. If I am, I apologize. With the 0.6, we are fine, because as the chair has pointed out, we are removing a project, a material project, material in dollars as well as in its name, the material recovery facility, from the capital plan, the 10-year capital plan. So with 0.6 and the removal of that project, we more or less have landed in the same place that we were with the original recommendation that came to you last time, which did have that project in there. We're now comfortable, as I've said, that we can take that out. If that's not your question, I apologize, and you could reframe it, and I'd be happy to respond overall. But as I said, Norm tried to get at the whole issue of, if you want to go further, there are some impacts, and we would suggest, for example, some deferral on the ambulance project as an example.
Okay, thank you, because there are a lot of obviously competing priorities, and in particular, from my perspective, I would hate to see usually in situations like this, when we're prioritizing and reprioritizing things to find savings, I worry about things like our climate change plan and various other infrastructure projects that support a reduction in greenhouse gas emission targets, usually those things get put to the side. And I would hate to see any of those projects be put to the side because now, given the federal announcement, given other initiatives that are happening, those sorts of projects are being funded and promoted by other levels of government. And so I share that publicly because, you know, if there's a way that we can continue to find savings without sacrificing some of those big sort of future-led projects, then I would support that. But I did want to put it on the record that I am concerned about some of those other projects that are a huge priority that I would hate to see on the chopping block. So I'm not sure yet where I'm going to land. I'm still open to hearing everybody and my colleagues debating. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Daskell.
Thank you through the chair. And I've got to say that I think anything that we could do this year to get people over the hump, the reality here too is the fact that a lot of these businesses, and we talk about this at the city level, and we talk about it at the regional level, especially on the business side, that these businesses have been shuttered for a great number of months, and on top of that, you know, these folks, it's that whole trickle down effect. You know, if people can't make a buck with their business, how the heck can they pay, you know, their bills at home? The one question I do have is, I just want to be clear on the motion that's on the floor from Councillor Sato and Leshy, is that it's the removal of the 1% levy and extending it for an additional year to 2027. That is not what's on the floor. I want to be clear what the motion is that we're
Perhaps, Steve, the chair will try, but I believe where we ended up at the 0.6 for the reasons staff gave, and I believe the motion is the budget as presented, except for there will be no 1% or 0.6% infrastructure levy this year, but what we've lost will be recouped over the next 5 years, in addition to the yearly infrastructure levy. I see Councillor Sato nodding. I think that's got it. So,
so essentially we're at zero for this year. Is that correct, Pat? And then we're going to make that up over the next 5. Okay, and whether it's 1 or 1.1 or 1.2, whatever it is, that'll be determined by staff as the CAO was mentioning.
yes, as it relates solely to the infrastructure levy, the rest of the body of the budget still prevails. Yeah, very good. I think we've got it.
I would be comfortable with that because I can see that we're deferring some projects. We're not going to come out slash projects because, you know, infrastructure is infrastructure, and we do need those projects. They're important. Staff has also itemized them, so I'm good with that. I would be supportive of.
Thank you. My list is Sinclair and Innes. Councillor Sinclair.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I just find it concerning that we want to somehow reduce activity and then increase the funding in future years. One of the items on the agenda is construction cost index. It's been increasing 3.5% per year. So really it's going to cost more next year and next year and next year. You know, municipal government is so huge and important to Peel. It's a major economy in Peel. So any reduction in activity is a reduction in market activity. Businesses. I have a concern, you know, on populations don't.
Ian, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm losing. Ian, just.
Is going to.
Ian, I'm sorry if you can hear me, Ian. I am sorry to interrupt, but you're phasing in and out. Please carry on, and if it does get worse, maybe I'll ask you to turn off your video. That very good. Go ahead, Ian. Let's give it another go. Thank you. With my apologies. Is
that better, sir?
Yes, it is. Yes, go ahead.
All right. Thank you. The population increases keep coming, and therefore the needs of infrastructure continue to come. And we need to continue on with maintaining the infrastructure plus increasing the capacity. You know, and I want to make the point that businesses rely on high quality standards of infrastructure in Peel. Great roads, great snow clearing, clean water that you can drink reliably. You know, just, I don't understand how this is going to make any difference to business's success or failure. So I don't support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Innes.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'll just, echo Councillor St. Clair's comment. Construction costs, infrastructure costs are only increasing. We've just heard our assessment. We know our assessment is going to decrease. I feel like we're going blind. We don't have the numbers. We don't know where we actually stand today, and we're making this decision. And while this is a rough year, the next 5 years are going to really be the rough year. They are going to be the make it or break it years for especially our business, quite frankly. If it's held on now, they may be able to hold on for another year, but we're going to see even more businesses, unfortunately, close over the next couple of years, and that investment is going to start to change. And so I think that since we are in a position of making this decision somewhat blindly because we don't really know where our assessment is, now is not the time to scale back, in the words of Councillor Starr, peanuts. It's not the time to tinker. $100 here, $100 there is tinker. And so I can't support this at this point in time. I think that the next budget next year, and I'm presuming in 6 months' time when we actually have more stats, that we're going to be looking at some of this again, because this is just the beginning. This isn't the worst. The worst is yet to come, and we need to prepare for that work. Now is not the time to be throwing away peanuts when we don't actually know what is for us. So I can't support this original motion. I would have actually left 1% as opposed to 0.6 because I think staff are trying to compromise. That compromise is a political compromise, and I don't think it should be a political decision. I think that we should be doing and looking at the best interest in the long term, the next 5 to 10 years, not the next year, because that's very, very short-sighted, and that's not typically the experience that the Region of Peel exemplifies throughout the province. Usually we're leaders and are looking for long-term planning and solutions. That's what's going on. So I don't. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Crombie.
Well, this has been a really interesting conversation, and I want to appreciate all the perspectives everyone's bringing to the table. And of course, I know everyone wants to do the right thing. Our residents are feeling the pain of COVID. Our small businesses are as well. But at the end of the day, everyone still wants the world-class programs and services that we provide for them, and they'll just get a little more angst-ridden and angry with us if we're not providing them. I don't want to push this down the road either. I would have supported the 1%. And certainly happy to support the 0.6%. So if both those motions fail and it goes back to 1%, I will support it. I think next year could even be worse. I don't see the point of pushing this down the road because down the road doesn't look good either. I think that's all I really wanted to say. I think I've said it all. Most of us, it's tough for everyone, but at the end of the day, it really is just a few dollars difference in people's pockets. But it's a huge impact on us and the ability for us to deliver those new paramedic stations and all the other capital programs that I know they want and they will need, and they will feel it when they don't have them when they're needed. So I'm not in support of reducing this whatsoever. I'll support whatever motion is put forward to keep it at 1% or the 0.6%. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes my list. So, Madam Clerk, I turn the vote over to you. Oh, Councillor, did anybody else wish to speak? I see Councillor Parrish. Councillor Groves, were you on my list?
I was, Mr. Chair, but I took my name off. Thank you.
Very good. Councillor Parrish, I see you waving. Did you have one last thing, please? Go ahead. Carolyn, I can't hear you. Are you muted?
I'm going to vote against this motion, but the motion that I would like to try after it is staying at 1% and the budget that the region has provided us. If that fails, somebody else can put the 0.6 on.
Very good. You were the mover, so I accept that as my next motion, and we'll see where we go from there if the first one fails. Madam Clerk, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councillor Singh?
Yes.
Councillor Singh in favor. Councillor Carlson? Councillor Carlson? Sorry, Councillor Parrish, I hear you.
He said no.
Okay. Councillor Carlson opposed. Mayor Crombie?
I oppose as well.
Mayor Crombie opposed. Councillor Demerla?
No.
Councillor Demerla opposed. Councillor Dasco?
Yes.
Councillor Dasco in favor. Councillor Dillon?
Sorry, just to confirm, this is Councillor Sato and Councillor Paleshi's motion, correct?
That is correct.
Yes, in favor.
Councillor Dillon in favor. Councillor Downey?
Opposed.
Councillor Downey opposed. Councillor Fonseca?
Yes.
Councillor Fonseca in favor. Councillor Fortini?
Opposed.
Councillor Fortini opposed. Councillor Groves?
Yes, in favor.
Councillor Groves in favor. Councillor Innes?
Opposed.
Councillor Innes opposed. Councillor Kovac?
Yes.
Councillor Kovac in favor. Councillor Mahoney?
Yes.
Councillor Mahoney in favor. Councillor McFadden?
Yes.
Councillor McFadden in favor. Councillor Medeiros?
No.
Councillor Medeiros opposed. Councillor Paleshi?
Yes.
Councillor Paleshi in favor. Councillor Parrish?
No.
Councillor Parrish opposed. Councillor Raz?
Yes.
Councillor Raz in favor. Councillor Sato?
Yes.
Councillor Sato in favor. Councillor Santos?
Yes.
Councillor Santos in favor. Councillor Sinclair?
Opposed?
Councillor Sinclair opposed. Councillor Starr?
No.
Councillor Starr opposed. Mayor Thompson?
Opposed.
Mayor Thompson opposed. Councillor Vicente?
No.
Councillor Vicente opposed. Moment. It's a tie vote. So at this point, the vote will fail unless the chair decides to cast a vote.
And I'm happy to explain my position is if we didn't have alternate motions and I had to break a tie to keep the business going forward, I would, but you have alternative motions and I want the will of council to prevail. So I will not exercise my right to vote. I declare the vote lost on a tie. Can you have the next vote before you, please?
Just to confirm with Councillor Parrish, this is the vote with the 0.6%?
No, this is the vote with 1% plus the budget as presented.
Okay, just one moment.
Mr. Chair, we need to separate the salary out as I have a conflict. So we need to vote on that separately in the motion, please.
Very good. And the other piece of clarity that I need, Councillor Parrish, I was speaking the 0.6. You've made it very clear it's the 1% to take advantage of that windfall. I understand. I just needed to confirm that Mr. Thompson at Merita was still satisfied to second that motion so that it's duly before me at the full 1%. He's giving me the thumbs up, so it's an appropriate motion before me, acknowledging the situation that Councillor Sato has. Madam Clerk, the recorded vote over to you.
Okay. So at this
Sorry,
point,
just clarify, Mr. Chair, this is for the full 1%?
Correct.
Yes. What we'll do at this point is we'll take just the salary portion of the budget, which includes a 1.75% non-union salary band adjustment. So what I'd ask at this time is if Councillor Sato, we could have staff place you in the lobby for the vote, and once the vote has concluded, we will bring you back into the meeting for the other portion. Okay, so we'll just need a few minutes to ensure that that's done. Thank you.
Here she is collecting 2 paychecks for her kids.
Still make sure everybody's on mute, please. Thank you. Madam Clerk, I trust Councillor Sato's out of the room properly, and we're getting a thumbs up from clerk, so you can take the motion on that one portion where she has declared a conflict as it relates to the COLA 1.75% cost of living. Over to you.
Thank you. So I just need a mover and a seconder for the motion. Mayor Crombie and Mayor Thompson. Thank you. Okay, and the motion before me is that the salary portion of the 2021 regional budget, which includes a 1.75% non-union salary band, be approved.
Again, if everybody can ensure you're on mute, please, while the clerk calls the vote. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, now I'll begin with Councillor Singh.
Yes.
Councillor Singh in favor. Councillor Carlson.
Yes.
Councillor Carlson in favor. Mayor Crombie.
Yes.
Mayor Crombie in favor. Councillor Demerla.
Yes.
Councillor Demerla in favor. Councillor Dasco.
Yes.
Councillor Dasco in favor. Councillor Dillon.
No.
Councillor Dillon opposed. Councillor Downey.
In favor.
Councillor Downey in favor. Councillor Fonseca.
Yes.
Councillor Fonseca in favor. Councillor Fortini.
In favor.
Councillor Fortini in favor. Councillor Groves.
No.
Councillor Groves opposed. Councillor Innes.
In favor.
Councillor Innes in favor. Councillor Kovac.
Yes.
Councillor Kovac in favor. Councillor Mahoney.
Yes, in favor.
Councillor Mahoney in favor. Councillor McFadden.
Yes.
Councillor McFadden in favor. Councillor Medeiros.
Yes.
Councillor Medeiros in favor. Councillor Paleshi.
Yes.
Councillor Paleshi in favor. Councillor Parrish.
Yes.
Councillor Parrish in favor. Councillor Raz.
No.
Councillor Raz opposed. And Councillor Sato has declared a conflict for this vote. Councillor Santos.
Yes.
Councillor Santos in favor. Councillor Sinclair.
In favor.
Councillor Sinclair in favor. Councillor Starr.
In favor.
Councillor Starr in favor. Mayor Thompson.
In favor.
Mayor Thompson in favor. Councillor Vicente.
Yes.
Councillor Vicente in favor, and that carries.
Thank you. So that leaves the only other motion that remains, and for clarity, I understand it to be simply this: as moved by Councillor Parrish, seconded by Mayor Thompson, that the staff proposed budget, including the original 1% infrastructure levy for 2021, be approved. I think that's got it. Madam Clerk, over to you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Councillor Paleshi, point of order or clarification?
the last meeting I had asked for the 620,000 to be removed.
I'm not.
Is that not included in this portion?
I don't believe the mover and the seconder have spoken to that, so no, that's not what's before the chair. Madam Clerk, over to you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes?
last meeting I asked for a separate vote on the $620,000 for the monies going towards in the budget for the anti-human trafficking.
Yeah, Councillor, I do not have a motion before the chair, nor did you put one at the time.
I'm asking for a separate vote.
Yeah, Madam Clerk, if you can help me out through, I have the main budget motion before me. We've had discussion and debate. Madam Clerk, I'm in your hands.
Councillor, through the chair to Councillor Paleshi, I don't believe we had a seconder for your motion from last week. But if
It's not a motion. I'm just asking for it to be voted on separately.
Well, I need a motion for any vote, but through
would
to
need that as
the CAO, she's maybe trying to help us out here, Madam CAO.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. The program itself is not affected. What happened is we received additional provincial funding over a 5-year window, and we have allocated 1/5 of that funding to 2021. I think what Councillor Paleshi may be asking is, if we could take that extra money and expand the program. My conversation with staff right now, right at this point, is even if we, you know, if financially we wanted to do that, we simply would not have the capacity to be able to expand that, particularly in the COVID environment. So staff, we are quite satisfied with the recommendations that have been made around that particular piece of funding. I understanding Councillor Pleshy's concerns.
Yes, thank you. And I understand. I'm just asking for a separation of that particular item. I don't believe that needs a mover and a seconder.
Yes, it would. Yes, sir, clearly it's an amendment to the main budget motion that I have before me.
It's not an amendment.
Certainly it is. The
I'm
budget
just
is
asking
presented.
for it to be voted on separately. Any member can ask for a item to be voted on separately.
Yes,
and the budget. I've never experienced this before, where you needed to have a mover and a seconder to have something voted on separately. It's still within the motion. I'm just asking for it to be separated.
No, you certainly need a seconder for any motion that we're going to take as a vote. And what I'm ruling also is it's contrary to the main motion. I have a motion before me to move the budget as presented, and the mover and the seconder did not include that. I'm just going to turn to the clerk again.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Last week I asked for it to be separated. You acknowledged that I asked for it to be separated.
Yes, and today the motion was not put before me and seconded. So it was not the compilations of motions that I've been working through. But Councillor Palesci, if you give us one moment more, the clerk here is trying to see what is the best way to proceed forward. As far as I'm concerned, as the chair, I have a motion before me that's been moved and seconded. We've debated it. I don't hear the mover and the seconder speaking to this and adding it accordingly. So Madam Clerk, how do you suggest we proceed? Okay, so I think the CAO spoke to that, though. The question is, how would that materially change our budget? And I think the CAO spoke to it. It's a matter of process and trying to deliver on the service. So I'm at a bit of a loss. Madam Clerk, if you wanted to explain how you might suggest we deal with it, and then I want to hear what the CAO and the staff have to say, please proceed.
Okay. Well, I would defer to the CAO or to Norm if they want to confirm that the numbers that we have, we can put that on the screen if that changes. If it doesn't change, then we can put it forward as a separate vote, similar to how we handled the salary portion.
Yeah, through you. So right now, the budget is based on an allocation of funding to that line program, to that line item, which has reduced the budget by $620,000. If you took that $620,000 out, your budget would go up and your tax rate would have to go up. I'm not sure if that's what Councillor Pleshy is proposing, but I'm not the clerk, so I'm going to sit back on that part. I think he's just asking to have it voted on separately.
Point of order, Mr. Chair, as the seconder. I think Councillor Pleshy, I think he just wants it separated so it's recognized. Is that what he's looking for? That's all? I'm not sure.
That I would have no problem with because it wouldn't change the numbers of the budget. I think he's asking for an additional amount to be accelerated. But over to you, Councillor Pleshy, as the mover of the motion.
You have that correct, Mr. Chair.
Then that's a material change to the budget that you can put before me and vote on, but it changes the motion that I have before me to approve the budget as presented with the 1%. So all I can suggest, I'm going to rule as chair, is I'm going to take a vote on the main budget itself. Councillor Palesci, if you want to put an additional motion afterwards that it be dealt with as an item, and even then I'm getting some heads nodding, and then it's kind of contrary to the main budget motion. So through to the commissioner.
I would see that to be contrary, yeah.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Michael. So through to staff, as chair, we've debated. I have the budget motion before me. It's been moved by Councillor Parrish and Councillor Thompson. I think it is clear.
I guess, Mr. Chair, what I'm at a loss for is, I made this request last week. I understand staff's position, but I you acknowledged the request that I made last week, and the way you've handled the motions before we voted on the last motion, you had already teed up the next motion, but then changed it to remove it and then put forward a different motion asking for, so everything's kind of going up and down, where I've sat back to say, okay, I know he's going to recognize it soon because he did acknowledge it last week, and now you're going right into the full 1%.
And my apologies, Councillor Paleshi, your point is well made, but at the time, your motion wasn't seconded then, and during the entire debate today, you never brought it up as a motion before the chair today. So it never had a life, and it didn't regain a life today as a motion, but the technicalities, is secondary. How do we get to where we want to be and the body wants to be? I still don't have a seconder for your motion, and I have the main budget motion before me. So in the absence of somebody directing me otherwise.
Point of order?
Yes, this is who?
Councillor Vicente, Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Councillor Vicente, your point of order.
Thank you. Is it not appropriate if Councillor Paleshi has a seconder that we could debate his motion and then incorporate it into a final vote?
Point of order, we have a motion on the floor.
Yeah,
We haven't called the vote, right?
Oh, no, it was in the clerk's hands. I'll tell you what I'm going to do, and I've ruled. We have the main budget before the chair. We've already been cascading down the vote. I'm going to rule that I have a motion before me. We've had a healthy debate. The second motion never had life at any point, but be that as it may, if I made an error, I apologize, but I'm going to proceed with the vote. If someone wants to challenge the chair, they can. But we have the final budget and the motion that was put before me now from Councillor Sato, Councillor Thompson. Madam Clerk, the vote over to you.
Not Councillor Sato.
Mr. Chair, I've had my hand up to ask a question on the motion.
So have I.
Would you recognize those of us that have questions, please, before you take the vote?
Yeah, we had the motion before the chair. We exhausted all questions. I have the motion.
Not. We were discussing my motion previously. We took the vote, and now you brought another motion forward, and I have a question on it.
And I'll say it again. You didn't put it forward at the appropriate time when I asked for it.
Mr. Chair, this is becoming a real farce. Forget it.
Thank you. The motion is before the chair. Madam Clerk, call the vote, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councillor Singh.
No.
Councillor Singh opposed. Councillor Carlson.
No.
Councillor Carlson opposed. Mayor Crombie.
So, just to be clear, I'm voting for the original budget with the 1%.
Vote, please.
Excuse me, are you being rude?
No, I'm just asking. The chair is pushing the vote. Let's vote.
Councillor Paleshi, point of order, you are being rude and indignant. Mr. Chair, can I please have clarification on what I'm voting on?
I'm sorry that you
I was not allowed to get clarification, so I don't see why anyone else could.
Order, Madam Clerk, what is the motion one more time before the chair? Okay, and I will read it as such. Thank you. As moved by Councillor Parrish, as seconded by Councillor Thompson, that the 2021 operating budget for a total value of $2,690,818 is set out in the summary 1 of the 2021 consolidated operating and capital budget attached as Appendix 2 to the report of the Commissioner of Finance and Chief Financial Officer listed on the February 11, 2021 Regional Council Budget Agenda titled 2021 Operating and Capital Budget be approved. And further, that bylaw number to apportion, that the bylaw to apportion the $1,178,126,000 net levy fund requirement be presented for enactment. And further, that the 2021 capital budget for property tax and utility rate supported services totaling $998,822,000 as set in the summary 6A of the 2021 consolidated operating and capital budget attached as Appendix 2 to the subject report be approved. And further, that the consolidated 10-year capital plan totaling $10,482,000,000 as summarized in Summary 7 of 2021 Consolidated Operating and Capital Budget attached as Appendix 2 to the subject report be approved in principle for planning purposes, and further that the changes to the user fees and charges proposed in Summary 8 of the 2021 Consolidated Operating and Capital Budget attached as Appendix 2 to the subject report, including the removal of the Peel Regional Police user fees and charges, be approved to take effect in accordance with the associated bylaw, and further that the Council's approval of the required regional police fees and charges pursuant to Section 397 of the Municipal Act 2001 not be required, and further that the water, wastewater, and wastewater management system fees and charges as outlined in Summary 9 of the 2021 Consolidated Operating Capital Budget as attached to Appendix 2 to the subject report be approved to take effect in the accordance with the associated bylaw, and further that the Commissioner of Finance and Chief Financial Officer be authorized to carry out any necessary technical adjustments to the 2021 operating budget as presented and the necessary levy bylaw for enactment, and further that the necessary user fee bylaw be presented for enactment. Put differently, the staff presented report that was put to us with the 1% levy that we want added as prescribed by staff. That is what is before you. Madam Clerk, we can start again if you'll give everybody the opportunity to recue the vote. Recorded vote, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll begin again with Councillor Singh.
Opposed.
Councillor Singh opposed. Councillor Carlson.
No.
Councillor Carlson opposed. Mayor Crombie.
Yes.
Mayor Crombie in favor. Councillor Demerla.
Yes.
Councillor Demerla in favor. Councillor Dasco.
No.
Councillor Dasco opposed. Councillor Dillon.
No.
Councillor Dillon opposed. Councillor Downey.
In favor.
Councillor Downey in favor. Councillor Fonseca.
No.
Councillor Fonseca opposed. Councillor Fortini.
In favor.
Councillor Fortini in favor. Councillor Groves.
No.
Councillor Groves opposed. Councillor Innes.
In favor.
Councillor Innes in favor. Councillor Kovac.
No.
Councillor Kovac opposed. Councillor Mahoney.
No.
Councillor Mahoney opposed. Councillor McFadden.
No.
Councillor McFadden opposed. Councillor Medeiros.
Yes.
Councillor Medeiros in favor. Councillor Palashi.
No.
Councillor Palashi opposed. Councillor Parrish.
Yes.
Councillor Parrish in favor. Councillor Raz.
No.
Councillor Raz opposed. Councillor Sato.
Absolutely no.
Councillor Sato opposed. Councillor Santos.
No.
Councillor Santos opposed. Councillor Sinclair.
In favor.
Councillor Sinclair in favor. Councillor Starr.
In favor.
Councillor Starr in favor. Mayor Thompson.
In favor.
Mayor Thompson in favor. Councillor Vicente.
Yes, in favor.
Councillor Vicente in favor. And the motion is lost.
So, Madam Clerk, I need a motion before me for a budget.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move the 0.6%.
Oh, I was going to move it, but fine, I'll second it. Then this is Councillor Damerla.
Very good. Thank you. So we'll give the clerk a moment. And I want to acknowledge that was moved by Mayor Crombie. It was seconded by Councillor Demerla. It is the motion that you heard just a moment ago, but at the 0.6, which is the latest recommendation from staff, that is a fresh motion before the chair. Does anybody wish to speak to the motion? List yourself accordingly, please, and I will entertain speakers. Seeing none, I see Councillor Dasco raising his hand. Councillor Dasco.
Thank you, through the chair. Sorry, I couldn't get to the button fast enough. I just wanted to ask, the 0.6 motion, is this having, I guess, similar to what Councillor Sato had brought up earlier, that if there was spillover from that it would be pushed out to 5 years as opposed to the 4 years with the bump up next year?
I believe the answer to that is there's no spillover whatsoever. We're fully funded as we hope to be.
Okay. So the reduction of that facility would take it down to 0.6.
Yeah, no further harm or changes over the next 5, and the CAO's nodding, and I think I'm getting a thumbs up on that.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to be clear.
Not at all. Thank you. Councillor Paleshi on my list. Councillor Paleshi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just with respect to the 620,000, sorry, I'm getting an echo. I understand that, you know, staff we've received monies from the province, and then staff brought forward a budget with the reduction of the 620,000 to offset. I just and I understand the whole portion of it where it kind of just it remains in the bucket, but it's being taken out of, and right, some may say rightfully so, because of the monies that we have received from the province, 3 million and change. I guess from what I look at, though, is even though we previously allocated this funding for anti-human trafficking, I think that it clearly makes a stance that we have something to say when it comes to human trafficking within the region of Peel. If we go back to the fact that we did allocate this, there is new funding from the province, but we're still putting that forward. So that's kind of where I was going with everything in terms of trying to get that separated. If I'm wrong with that, if maybe staff can, oh, I see Janice is on the board already. Okay, I'll yield to Janice. Thank you.
And Michael, before she answers, if I may, and I hope I'm consistent in this regard, as we speak, I do not have a budget. The 2 motions were dealt with. I have a fresh motion. If, as she's explaining, you want to put an motion or an amendment on the floor, I would consider it totally appropriate now. Please keep that in mind as we hear the response from the Commissioner. Commissioner Sheehy?
Thank you very much, and through the chair. So I did want to clarify that if the intent of the motion is for us to retain both the regional and the provincial funding to expand the work of the anti-human sex trafficking strategy, I need to be realistic in terms of expectations. And at the risk of reiterating what the CAO has said, many of the staff in the region, including in human services, have been reassigned to support health in their mass vaccination program. So I would be very limited in being able to expand the strategy this year. In fact, we have actually paused the work of our strategy task force, which is future focused. So I have rarely tried to dissuade council from giving me additional funding, but realistically, I would be very limited in being able to expand the work in 2021. Thank you.
And thank you, Janice, for that. And I think that's kind of what I understood, and I appreciate the email that reaching out that you did for me. I guess then what happens to the provincial dollars? Are we still allowed to, you know, bank those dollars and use them once we have the staff available to do so, where we pull them back from health?
So through the chair, we will be fully utilizing the provincial dollars. Basically, what we are doing is swapping out the regional dollars for the provincial dollars, and that has resulted in a tax decrease. But those funds will be fully utilized this year to continue to do work through our community hub that's focused on anti-human sex trafficking.
So, okay, so in the end, it does work out to the fact that, you know, since we had to pull from to health because of the pandemic, we are able to utilize those dollars where we wouldn't be able to utilize the extra dollars anyways.
Yes, through the chair, if you made a motion for us to retain both the regional and the provincial dollars, I would be very limited in my capacity to use that additional funding in 2021, as I said, because many of our resources have been reassigned to health.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Michael. Are there any other questions at this time regarding the motion before the floor? Then, Madam Clerk, I'm going to take as read as I made. It's the exact same piece I read for you a moment ago that took a couple of minutes. Put differently, what you have before you now, after all our deliberations, and it was good deliberations, what you have before you is the staff recommended budget with the new explanation why the infrastructure levy only need be 0.6%, which does not kick anything down the road because of a 4.4% true savings. Madam Clerk, the recorded vote over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councillor Singh.
Yes.
Counselor Singh in favor. Counselor Carlson.
Yes.
Counselor Carlson in favor. Mayor Crombie.
Yes.
Mayor Crombie in favor. Counselor Demerla.
Yes, please.
Counselor Demerla in favor. Counselor Dasco.
Yes.
Counselor Dasco in favor. Counselor Dillon.
Yes.
Counselor Dillon in favor. Counselor Downey.
In favor.
Counselor Downey in favor. Counselor Fonseca.
Yes.
Counselor Fonseca in favor. Counselor Fortini.
Yes.
Counselor Fortini in favor. Counselor Groves.
Yes.
Counselor Groves in favor. Counselor Ennis.
In favor.
Counselor Ennis in favor. Counselor Kovac. Counselor Kovac. Counselor Mahoney.
Yes, in favor.
Counselor Mahoney in favor. Counselor McFadden.
In favor.
Counselor McFadden in favor. Counselor Medeiros.
Yes.
Counselor Medeiros in favor. Counselor Paleshi.
Yes.
Counselor Paleshi in favor. Counselor Parrish.
Reluctantly, yes.
Counselor Parrish. Counselor Parrish in favor. Counselor Raz.
Reluctantly at the other end of the spectrum, yes.
Counselor Raz in favor. Counselor Sato.
Very reluctantly, like Councillor Raz, yes.
Counselor Sato in favor. Counselor Santos.
Yes.
Counselor Santos in favor. Counselor Starr.
Yes.
Counselor Starr in favor. Counselor Sinclair.
Yes, thank you. In favor.
Counselor Sinclair in favor. Mayor Thompson.
Yes, in favor.
Mayor Thompson in favor. Counselor Vicente.
And lastly, yes.
Counselor Vicente in favor. And I'm just going to call one more time for Counselor Kovac.
Yes, thank you.
Counselor Kovac in favor, and that's unanimous. Thank you.
Wonderful. All of that to end up at approving the budget unanimously as presented by council. After a marvelous debate and a very good discussion, it was heartfelt all around, and I think your constituents should be proud that we'd go to war over $20 to $40 because it matters. So well done to all of you. With that, Madam Clerk, to close out the regional debt issue, we dealt with that. To close out this portion of our business today as it relates to the budget, I believe I only need two more bylaws that you're handing to me. And just make sure I've got them right. So this is the one you're telling me to close us out, and it would be moved by Councillor Parrish, seconded by Mayor Crombie, that the bylaws listed on the February 11, 2021 Regional Council budget agenda, being bylaws 6, 2021 to 10, 2021 inclusive, be given the required number of readings, taken as read, signed by the regional chair and the deputy regional clerk, and the corporate seal be affixed thereto. All in favor? Do I have any opposed? That carries. Madam Clerk? One more. This motion moved by Councillor Fonseca, seconded by Councillor Raz, that bylaw 16, 2021 to confirm the proceedings of the Regional Council meeting at its budget meeting held on February 11, 2021 to deliberate the 2021 budget and to authorize the execution of documents in accordance with the Region Appeal bylaws relating thereto, be given the required number of readings, taken as read, signed by the regional chair and the deputy regional clerk, and the corporate seal be affixed thereto. Any opposed? Seeing none, a motion to adjourn the budget meeting. That carries. Thank you very much. And that's going to bring me to our formal regional council meeting for today. What I'm going to propose to my colleagues is we have a couple of deputants. I thought we might start the meeting, deal with our deputants that have been waiting patiently. Then perhaps around the 12:15 hour, we may adjourn for a break and then carry on with what I think will be the COVID presentation. So just to cue you up as to how I hope to proceed. And with that, we're into the Regional Council meeting of Thursday, February 11, 2021. I start, Madam Clerk, throwing it over to you for our roll call for this council meeting. Oh, and the clerk's waving that we may need a time. Do we have to re-queue people to get back in? Well, I'm told we need 2 minutes just to sort of reconstitute ourselves technically at the clerk's table. So with apologies, they're just making sure we're ready to go anew.